Thanks, music team. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I get to serve as one of the pastors here. So glad to be with all of you today. We are nearing the end, actually, of our sermon on the lectionary. And for anyone that does not know what the lectionary is, it is just lots of smart people, broke up the Bible over 3 years that in a church you read most of the Bible through different sections, repeating in conversation with what's going on in the church calendar. And so we do it often in the summer for a bunch of reasons. One, I really like that if you are a member of St. Thomas or a person that attends here, and then you are off vacationing somewhere and you're one of those folks that goes to church when you're on vacation, which 19 jewels in your crown if that's you. But if you are, then you walk into a church that's doing a lectionary and you actually hear the same sermon or the same text that we're reading. There's a way of us staying together. I also really like it and profoundly dislike it because it makes us preach on passages we might otherwise skip. For instance, today's reading, Matthew 15:21 through 28. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon," but he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." And he answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But when she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me," he answered, "It is not fair to take away the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Right? Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat crumbs that fall from their master's table." And Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done to you as you wish." And her daughter was healed from that moment. So, complicated story, right? There's a lot that is weird here. Jesus is kind of racist. And this woman has to plead and get called a dog in order for her daughter to get healed, which should unsettle us a little bit. Actually, when you read almost every ancient Christian commentary, from the earliest commentators, most of them comment that's a weird thing Jesus just did. So let's lean into a little bit. I think as we dig in, we'll see a little bit more texture and a few more angles that might make this story more useful for us today, other than just calling people dogs. So, starting again. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. And just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out. This is the only time anyone in the New Testament is referred to as a Canaanite. Full stop. Never happens. We know that Canaanites existed in the Old Testament. There are lots of fights between Israel and Canaanite people. They are the great arch nemesis of Israel for many hundreds of years of their history. But this is the only time the only time anyone is called a Canaanite in the New Testament, because the Canaanites do not exist anymore. And so this is telling us some things about this woman. One, she's probably from a minority culture, maybe a more pagan tradition even than Roman and Greek traditions. But two, there's an intentional thing going on here of linking this woman with the great enemies of Israel's ancient past. And I just want us to hold that for a moment, that she harkens back to those great enemy days. She came out to meet him. She leaves the community of safety. She comes out to where he is, outside of town, outside of all the ways that would keep her safe, and she enters into an honest conversation with her, which is wild. She starts shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David," and this should automatically perk up the ears of the listeners in the room, because this is a Canaanite woman, right? Surely she doesn't know what it means to understand the Messiah or any Jewish language. Surely she wouldn't get any of that, and yet she does. "Have mercy on me, Son of David." There's something about this woman that is more than meets the eye, and the text is leading us towards that. This is something surprising. "My daughter is tormented by a demon," but Jesus did not answer her at all, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away." The Greek is doing Jesus and his disciples a little dirty here, because what it actually says is set her free. Heal her. Why are you ignoring this woman? She's crying out to you. Do something about it. She sees you as Messiah. She is calling out for what she needs, and you're ignoring her. Explain that to us. There's a condemnation of Jesus by his disciples, which is beautiful, Because that same pushback comes here with this woman. When she starts shouting and he starts to throw words back at her, she engages with him, which says something about her, like she's a confident person here, but also this whole story says something about Jesus. Who is this guy who she does not know that feels safe enough for a foreigner woman to approach and argue with? That says something about how Jesus carries himself. That says something about the way that his reputation is spread, that any woman would think at this time, in this place in history, that it was even okay to talk to this traveling rabbi, let alone challenge him. The same truth is happening with his disciples. Master, why are you not healing this woman? Don't you do this thing? And Jesus seems to know why he is here. I've been sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which is true and isn't exactly true. Jesus has healed the centurion servant several chapters earlier, and maybe that servant was Jewish, but the text doesn't say anything about it, and the centurion certainly was not Jewish. And so we see some of these cracks breaking through. It's really important if you're in Matthew's the gospel written to the Jewish community, that if Jews are about to walk out of the room because this Jesus is so Gentile-loving, that I'd imagine Jesus saying these words helps the Jews sit back down in their seats as they're getting upset. Why is a Canaanite woman coming to this guy that you claim is the Messiah? Like, you can see the anger building. And then Jesus says this thing where they're like, okay, send her away, keep shouting at us. Jesus does this thing. Then she falls down and kneels. Again, the Greek is robbing her because what it says is she falls down to worship him. She has not met him. She only knows of him from his reputation. Yet she sees him as Messiah and falls down and worships him. Jesus gets worshipped a bunch in Matthew's gospel. From the Magi that meet him as a baby, to Herod claiming he wants to do it when he tells the Magi to bring him the baby Jesus to him, to the centurion, to Jairus, the synagogue leader, and now this woman. There's this wild thing happening where all of these different people from radically different traditions come face to face with Jesus and cannot help but fall to their knees and worship him. But this is a big swing, especially for a woman out in the middle of nowhere. And before saying, she said, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." Woof, Jesus, right? Dog, it turns out, is a shockingly common way of referring to Gentiles if you are a Jew in the ancient Near East in the first century. And Jesus does, and the commentators call this harsh almost exclusively. St. Jerome is like, wow, Theodore of Mopsuestia, ooh, John Chrysostom, okay, Jesus. All of them are like, well, that's a little wild thing. But the woman isn't flustered by it. She rolls with it. She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat at the crumbs that fall at their master's table." And Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done to you as you wish." I do think my own church tradition makes me read this interaction as if Jesus is frowning and being stern. And I don't actually think there's anything in the text that carries that sternness. And I think it's actually very reasonable to imagine this interaction with both of them smirking. This is a woman who's already come out, that already sees him, that is already worshiping. And I can see him saying, "Don't you know that I'm only here for the house of Israel? I don't throw the food to the dogs," and smile. And she laughs and says, which isn't actually to defend it, but I think it's to say sometimes we read our own anger into a text, and it makes the text more complicated. And yet, Jesus says, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. Your daughter is healed from this moment." This is almost verbatim the Greek that Jesus says to the centurion that is healing when his servant is. So there's an intentionality going on in Matthew here to link these two stories. Here is a centurion who comes and says, "You don't even need to come to my house. I know you have the power to command things to happen. Do it." And Jesus is like, "Your faith is so good, your servant is healed." And this woman comes to him and says, "Don't we even deserve the crumbs that fall to your feet?" And he says, "Good point, your servant is healed." Now there's a lot of things that are in intense juxtaposition here. Because we have a pretty aggressive Jesus, even if he's got a wink or a smile on his face, calling a woman a dog, which is a wild thing. And we have a woman here who understands Jesus more than almost anyone around him at this point, that knows what he is capable of and will go toe-to-toe with him anyway. Christian tradition actually calls this woman the mother of the Gentiles of the church. That the Jews have Mary, and the rest of us have this woman whose name is forgotten, because she went out and met him, and on behalf of her daughter, or those of us that would come after her, pleads with Jesus for their healing, for our healing. The church sees this woman as someone as an incredible example. She is confident, she is smart, and her courage lets her stand up to who she believes, or at least is claiming to believe, is the Messiah, and challenge him. But it's still kind of a weird story. And so I look to the cloud of witnesses. And St. John Chrysostom, who we apparently are just going to keep mentioning, look out Irenaeus for any of you else, says this in his commentary on Matthew about this woman. See her humility as well as her faith. For he had called the Jews children, but she was not satisfied with this. She even called them masters. So far as was she from grieving at the praises of others, she said, Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Behold the woman's wisdom. She did not venture so much as to say a word against anyone else. She was not stung to see others praised, nor was she indignant to be reproached. Behold her constancy. When he answered, It is not fair to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs, she said, Yes, Lord. He called them children, but she called them masters. He used the name of a dog, but she described the actions of a dog. Do you see this woman's humility? Then compare her humility with the proud language of the Jewish leaders. We are Abraham's seed and have never been in bondage to any man. We are born of God, but not so this woman. Rather, she calls herself a dog and them masters, so for this reason she became a child. For what does Christ then say? O woman, great is your faith. So we might surmise that this is the reason he put her off, in order that he might proclaim aloud this saying, and that he might crown the woman, Be it done for you as you desire. This means your faith indeed is able to effect even greater things than these. Nevertheless, be unto you even as you wish. This voice was at one with the voice that said, Let heaven be, and it was. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Do you see how this woman too contributed not a little to the healing of her daughter? For note that Christ did not say, Let your daughter be made whole, but great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire. These words are not uttered at random, nor were they flattering words, but great was the power of her faith for our learning. To me, this story shifts as I read Chrysostom. Because it shifts from this story where Jesus shames a woman for being Jewish and she out-argues him and so he does a thing. And it becomes a story pitting this outsider against the expectations of Israel. Just like Jesus does with the Good Samaritan story, when he starts a story and says, believe it or not, it's not the priest that helps. It's not the rabbi that helps. It's that enemy of Israel. And believe it or not, my acceptance is not coming from those in Jerusalem with power, but it is coming from those outside of the powers. Those ancient enemies of Israel, even the Canaanites, can see me. Believe it or not, the centurion has more faith than anyone in Israel. Believe it or not, Jesus seems willing to take our prejudice, to take our racism, to take our narrow categories and use them and then hold them up to expand everything, to blow it apart. I will meet you in the words that you use for people, and then I will show you how ridiculous those words are. You call her a dog? Fine, let's call her a dog. Turns out that dog knows more than these scribes and these Pharisees that do not get it. You call them a Samaritan as if they are other and they are different and they are weak. Well, turns out they are better at caring for God's people than you are. You see them as a centurion, the enemy of Israel, the soldier that enslaves us. Turns out he has more faith than anyone that is in the temple preaching this Saturday. There's something about what Jesus does here that takes our expectations. If we are Matthew's audience, we are Jews sitting in a synagogue somewhere in Palestine in the first century, We know how the story is supposed to go. This Jewish rabbi is supposed to talk down to this woman. And instead of talking down to her, they engage as equals. And her faith does something that changes everything. It's like Jesus says, okay, sure, whatever words you want to use, let me blow up your categories. And I think there's something for us in that maybe our categories aren't serving us. That maybe God works outside of the categories whether or not we want to work inside of them. Maybe those that seem like our enemies, both ancient, the Canaanites, and modern, the centurion, might be the places that could teach us something about this God that is bigger than any box we could ever build. And maybe when we have the humility to learn from places that we do not expect to learn, to trust in someone that we're not fully sure we can trust in, then God does something to bring about God's kingdom in new and completely radical ways. I think these are stories, one after another, about how God uses unexpected prophets from humble backgrounds to bring about God's kingdom more than any person from power and prestige that we might expect. Herod doesn't get it. Jairus doesn't even fully get it. The synagogue leaders don't get it. The high priests do not get it. The centurion gets it. The Samaritan gets it. This Canaanite woman gets it. And in each of those getting it's, their humility allows them to walk towards this God and become a fertile ground for those mustard seeds. I think there's an invitation to us to shape our lives around this humility. I think we are so quick to be offended by so many people, and we miss out on a connection that comes beyond it. You use the wrong word for me, you're my enemy. What if it's you use the wrong word for me? Let's spin it on its head and tell you something else. You didn't get the right language, so we're out. What if it isn't? What if we can challenge the language with a wink and then move towards them anyways? What if the humility of trusting that you can call me whatever you want, I still know what I need, allows something radically new to happen for all of us? It's a complicated story. It's dripping with Jesus learning what it means to be the Messiah for all people. Even in this interaction, I think he is wrestling with his own call. I think I'm called to the people of Israel. I did it for that. This woman seems, she understands. But even by the end of this story, Jesus' understanding of his call has expanded. Because later in Matthew, he calls for the whole inclusion of the Gentiles, to go out to the ends of the earth to make disciples. This Jesus is growing, he's expanding, he's understanding a new thing. And maybe he's doing it to lead us along, because when he starts hating the same people we might trust him. And then he ends loving people we didn't know it was possible to love. And so maybe we can do the same. Church, I think there's an invitation to us to just go ahead with loving, to go ahead with trusting, and to become fertile ground, even when no one expects our ground to be fertile. May we be a people that do that pursue it, and that trust that even when that person might use those wrong words, maybe they aren't worth abandoning. Maybe they're worth learning into. Let's pray. God of the universe, thanks for bringing us along. Thank you for this woman who went before me to create a space in your kingdom for me. Thank you for the ways that you are moving through us. Thank you for the opportunities for us to just take some breaths and trust that you might have a plan, even if we don't understand it. Thank you for the ways that you are willing to work through people that we don't think anyone can work through.